I just went on a stadium tour with Ed Sheeran and Khalid all summer long. Let me explain. I've been shooting a lot for Khalid, whether that's single covers or shows. So naturally, when he got asked to go on tour with Ed Sheeran, I got asked to go as well. This tour just finished yesterday, and it's a super interesting format for a stadium tour. Every show on tour from May to September was just every Saturday. So we would fly out of LA on Friday, we'd have our show Saturday, and we'd fly home Sunday, which was and is an exhausting sort of flight schedule, but was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was gonna be, and I had a lot of fun. So, shooting a stadium show. This tour broke quite a few records at the stadiums that we played at. These shows are between 60,000 to, I wanna say 90,000 people in attendance. Sounds pretty crazy, a little bit stressful, but it was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was gonna be. The stage is circular, right in the center of the stadium. There is 10 feet of a perimeter between the pit and where the stage starts. And that's the area that I got to spend most of my time in shooting this show. I only had one digital camera on me at all times and two lenses. I had the EOS R6 Mark II, which is actually recording this video right now, a 24-70 and a 70-200. I really enjoyed shooting with this Canon. It just felt very like effortless, but also I find shooting digital photos that way altogether after shooting film for 5 or 6 years straight. I mean, the process is just so vastly different, especially when it comes to like a concert setting where you're shooting as many photos as you can at a really high shutter speed as fast as you can to try to capture every moment where the artist looks good or is smiling or some cool moment is happening. So it was sweet. I spend about 90% of my time in this photo pit or on the stage. The other 10% I'd wander off into the crowd and shoot some wider scope photos, but I usually stuck pretty close to the stage to capture the moments that were happening right there. If you're curious, the settings I had on my camera during these shows, my aperture was between 2.8 and 5.6 the entire time. And of course, my shutter speed and ISO were always changing depending on how different the light was and if I wanted to capture motion in the photos. And yes, if you were curious, I did shoot a little bit of film on this tour during the shows. The hardest thing shooting these stadium shows for me wasn't anything to do with actually getting a good final result, but was just the height of the stage. I'm 6 feet tall and this stage was still way taller than me. So a lot of the time I was reaching my arm up all the way in the air, I was on my tiptoes and like spraying while looking at the screen on the back of the camera, hoping I was getting the right shot, which wasn't ideal at all, but that's kind of the magic of shooting with digital cameras as well. You can kind of just see the screen slightly and fire off a million images and get some really usable results. So that was like the hardest thing, is like being so much lower than the actual stage was high. I guess the other thing that wasn't necessarily challenging, but was more a little scary, is getting on the stage, because when you get on a circular stage in the middle of a stadium, it's like, it feels like all eyes are on you, which isn't really the case. Maybe some people will be kind of checking you out to see what you're doing, but for the most part, they're watching the artist. It really did feel like you were in the middle of a spotlight though. That said, every 45-minute set that we went out there and performed was really fun, and it was a great time, so no complaints. Now, after the show, we'd go right back to the green room. Khalid would have about an hour before he would go out to do another song with Ed, their song Beautiful People. And in that time, I would knock out all of the photos and all of the editing. On average, I shot 1,500 to 2,000 photos per show. I would go through on my laptop and pick like maybe 50 to 100 favorites, and then I used a very similar edit on all of the photos on the tour that I made for the shows. It also helps that with shows this big production, the lighting is almost always perfect on the artist. It wasn't necessarily all that difficult to get good, well-lit shots. I usually would knock out the edits in maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then airdrop them to Khalid or put them on Dropbox and send him a link. I thought it was fun to kind of do a quick turn and burn, because after that, sometimes we would go out to a bar or a club or something and all hang out and kind of decompress after we just did a massive show. So that was a really fun part of the process for me. This tour was really fun for so many reasons, but traveling to a new city every single weekend, kind of popping in, trying some good food, maybe going to a bar or two, and then, you know, having our show and then leaving was just like sweet. It was nice to spend a couple hours Friday and a couple hours Sunday either sleeping a little bit on the plane or like watching some TV or playing a video game. I've been really tapped into Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch, which has been a great travel companion. One thing that I really took advantage of on this tour was my ability to kind of choose whether or not I wanted to fly back to LA that weekend. I could choose to stay in the city we're in or have my return flight take me home to Raleigh to see some friends and family. So I tried to take as much advantage of that as I could. So this next section of the video is not about the photos I got to shoot while on tour, but it's the photos I got to shoot because of tour. Hopefully you stick around. I shot a lot of really cool film photos in the cities that I got to stay in for a little extra time. I stayed in Raleigh for 2 weeks with my family and shot some cool photos of my homie Ken. I think these turned out really cool because we used like a really bright light in natural daylight. It almost has a strobe-like effect. One thing I really have missed about the East Coast is just how green it is, which actually reminds me of the other photography I did in North Carolina. I shot my best friend Nance at William B. Umstead Park. The tree cover there is just crazy, and it's so green, so lush, the exact opposite of Los Angeles. We shot some photos. We also shot some vertical videos for his upcoming album, which actually comes out on September 22nd. I shot the cover for that too, on film. Mamiya RB67, 25-year-old expired Fuji NPH 800 or something ridiculous like that. It's called Every Daydream. You've got to check it out when it comes out. I ended up staying in New York for 2 weeks, hung out with one of my homies, Tony, which was sick, shot a bunch of cool photos of my friend Laura all around New York, just spent a day with her shooting a bunch of amazing stuff. Got to meet this amazing street photographer, Sissy Lou. You gotta check her out if you haven't heard of her before. I got to stay in Detroit for a couple days with Volandis. He set up a shoot with one of his homies, Corinne, and it turned out to be some of my favorite photos I shot this entire summer. Those photos really turned me up. I love those photos we shot. But it was also great to just kick it with him for like days at a time, just like having a beer and watching a movie and kind of just kicking it in Detroit. And that was special to see his city, and Detroit's sweet. When I was in Chicago, I got to see my mom and her 2 best friends who flew up from North Carolina to see the show. They're all fans of Ed Sheeran, and it was great to walk around Chicago and see some of the sights and just spend time with my mom. The last place I stayed for a couple extra days was Seattle, where my brother and one of my other best friends lives. My friend Ken from the photos in North Carolina flew up to meet us to come see the show. We went on this amazing hike near Mount Rainier.
We're lost, fully lost in the woods.
So I think we should go back and go up the trail.
Shot some film photos on that very liberally. I just was like, I just need to shoot a ton of photos. I also got to catch up with my friend Tiffany, who lives in Seattle, who actually just moved to Seattle from LA. And lastly, in Seattle, I shot with a model named Mome. We just kind of shot around this one park that had a really good view of the city and skyline. Since I was traveling, I felt pretty underprepared for the shoot. I really wish I had some more lights and stuff with me, but we did what we could with the gear I had. I just had my Pentax 6x7 and my Fuji GA645. And yeah, it's always good to get out and shoot, even if it's low stakes. When you go on a tour like this with these weeks free, I was like, I should take advantage of the ability to see my friends in all these different cities, and I feel like I did that pretty effectively. That's how I toured with Ed Sheeran and Khalid this summer. I hope I went into enough detail where it mattered. I thought it would be nice to make this a little bit less traditional of a video and not just be like gear, photos, and talk about some of the experiences and what I really loved about being on like a weekend tour like this. So lastly, I want to shout out my homie Levi Turner for supplying me with all of the 16mm footage you saw in this video. He's one of my best friends who is also on the tour with me the entire trip, and he was just shooting magic the entire time. So I'm really grateful he let me use some of his footage in this video. I'm glad to be back on YouTube. I've got some sweet videos coming up, and yeah, I guess I'll see you guys pretty soon. Hopefully, if I don't slack off again for 5 months and go on a summer stadium tour. So, as always, I am Linus, and I will talk to y'all later. Sweet.